I'm Don Mooers, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. SEIU, Service Employees International Union Local 500, has had a presence in Annapolis for many years, where it explains the needs of its diverse union members as they are affected by actions of the legislature and the governor, as all of us are. David Rodich, the executive director of SEIU 500, has the details. When residents of Montgomery County hear about the terrible news about child abuse in an elementary school in Prince George's County, I know that many of us have been wondering about what protections our public schools have put in place here in Montgomery County to protect our children. Jane DeWinter, who comments on a regular basis for this program, is here to report. There are two upcoming events that will take place in the county that are of interest to older people and younger people alike. First is an entrepreneur conference for older residents, and the second is a 50-plus employment expo. Stuart Rosenthal, publisher and editor of The Beacon, will tell us about these stories and hopefully so much more. Josiah Henson was an important man in our county and our history. And he's soon going to have a museum dedicated to him in North Bethesda. Merlyn Reineke, executive director of Montgomery Community Media, which is beaming this show right now, has this story. David, welcome back.
Thanks, Don. It's great to be back.
Tell us a little bit about what SEIU 500 is, and then I want to get to what your issues are this year in Annapolis.
Absolutely. SEIU Local 500 is an affiliate of the Service Employees International Union. We represent about 15,000 working men and women in Maryland and Washington, D.C., largely centered in the area of public education and universities.
Okay. Now, it's a lot of people you're representing.
Indeed.
A lot of important work they're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
Critical to our county, critical to our community. Mm-hmm. You're affected, your workers and what they're doing each and every day is impacted by what goes on in Annapolis.
It absolutely is. Everything from funding to expansions of workers' rights to support for early childhood and learning. All of these things have a very direct impact, not only on our members, but their families as well.
And as I hear this, as I listen to you here, it reminds me that many of the efforts that you've taken in Annapolis to help your membership have had the impact of helping all of us live better lives.
That's right, and that's the whole idea. Right?
There's a website coming up where people can learn about these ideas and everything else.
Absolutely.
It's SEIU 500, I think, at .org, right?
Right.
All right.
.org.
This year, particularly in Annapolis, I know a lot of folks have got questions here. What are your biggest issues that you're dealing with?
Well, the two biggest issues that our local is focused on is dealing with the area of expansion of collective bargaining rights and beginning the process of trying to take on this issue of the massive student debt that many of our kids leaving colleges and universities are feeling.
What particular bargaining rights are you or what aspects of bargaining are you?
Well, we're in our third year of trying to win collective bargaining rights for community college employees, both classified staff and faculty. Of the 15 schools, the only school that allows bargaining rights in the public sector for full-time and part-time faculty is Montgomery College. Every other college and every other university in the state does not allow for collective bargaining. So we're trying to get that legislation through this year. It would affect about 15,000 working men.
Let me follow up. Why is that important to the faculty members?
Well, it's important because the right to form a union is a very, very basic right that's enjoyed by every private sector worker in the state of Maryland. And most public employees, whether they're state employees or local government or school system employees, have this right. You have a group of about 15,000 workers who are denied these very basic rights that workers throughout the otherwise otherwise enjoy. By the way, this does not impose a union on any group of workers. It simply gives them the ability, if they so choose to do so, to form a union and engage in collective bargaining with their employer, like everybody else has.
David, I mean, this is the first full year of Larry Hogan in the governor's office. Do you see any significant change in the attitude toward unions in the State House, and this particular, significant change between one year over the other in the State House?
I would say indirectly it has. I mean, some of the positions that Governor Hogan has taken within GCEI funding and those kinds of...
GCEI is what?
Oh, sorry, the Geographic Cost of Education Index, right?
Okay.
The state allocated about $17.5 million for our school system,
Right.
which he is sitting on and simply not allowing to be dispersed.
Right.
That has a very direct impact on union members because it means, you know, larger class sizes, fewer hours, and in terms of our ability, our members' ability to support kids.
I think people might be wondering, when you're looking at a college campus, what job classifications would be covered under your union?
We represent about 85% of the adjunct faculty working in the District of Columbia, and we represent the adjunct faculty at Montgomery College. So the idea here would be that we would probably continue to focus in that area since there's been a lot of movement in that area.
I want to get to that other point, the student loan, student
Right.
debt, because we got about a minute left in this segment.
Okay, so very quickly what that is, the idea is we're trying to get enabling legislation from the state legislature to allow Montgomery County to create a student debt authority. And very briefly what this would do is it would authorize the county to float very low interest loans to basically raise money to purchase student debt from residents of the county and reissue that debt to the students at a far lower interest rate. $1.2 trillion is the current level of student debt in the United States. It exceeds credit card debt in this country.
That sounds exciting. What do you see good chances on that one?
Yes, I see very good prospects on both bills. We'll pass the collective bargaining bill hopefully in the House tomorrow, then it'll move to the Senate. And because the other student debt bill is a local bill, we're assuming passage of that as well.
All right, well listen, good luck. You know, it's a lot of work, it's nonstop, it's intense for the next month until sign or die, so good luck, David.
Thanks very much, Don.
All right, so we go from union issues to what's really such a sad, sad situation of children being abused in our schools, something that is, what a horror. Jane, in the lead we talked about it's a different jurisdiction. We're really looking at, can it happen here? Maybe you can set the stage a little bit about what happened in our neighboring jurisdiction, and then maybe you could start addressing whether it could happen here.
Right. Well, there's been a lot in the news and newspapers and in television and online media about a situation, an ex-employee. He was a student aide 2 years ago, and then I guess lost his position due to budget cuts, and was acting as a volunteer at an elementary school in Prince George's County. And it's recently come to light that he had been sexually abusing. I think now they have 16 victims. I believe they're all boys, ages 9 through 12. And some of them he was directly abusing. Some of them were, being filmed with phones that he had provided to people. So that happened there.
Now let's go through. Is it something that could never happen in Montgomery County, or is it something that we should be concerned with?
I think people should be concerned about it. I do think that there is a difference in the level of protections. Montgomery County does have stronger background check requirements than Prince George's County, but that also, it's not a panacea because many people who are child abusers don't have a record.
That's what I was going to say, yeah. And it seems like if 16 people were affected, did none of them come to adults and say this was happening? I understand one of them did and was told, I don't believe you, but how about if there's 16, you think there would have been a critical mass of people saying this is happening?
And what people are saying is that, this is always the case though, is like, well, I knew something was odd about him. Well, maybe, maybe not. But yes, I mean, the talk among the children is that all the kids in the school knew it, and that adults, weren't picking up on it. And I think that that's why we do need to be careful wherever we are, because you need to recognize, as adults, we need to recognize what are the signs, what's the behavior. I mean, the same things that make somebody say, oh, you're so great with kids.
Well, I've got 2 kids in Montgomery County Public Schools, and as a parent, what are some of the things that we need to do to keep our children safe in our local schools?
Good question.
Well, I think that you need to be aware. I mean, the way this was uncovered was a student's uncle regularly just checked out the child's phone and found nude pictures on it. And so, you know, kids today are all about like, oh, this is my phone, this is my Facebook, you
Okay,
can't
so
look at it. Yeah.
social, you got that, IT. What about with the school? I mean, you know, being engaged, I'm hoping from this that our teachers are getting, and our administrators are getting training in this.
Right, I
About what
think,
to recognize.
Yeah, I was going to say, our union representing 9,000 of 23,000 employees, I can assure you that the school system here has taken that very, very seriously. There's been a massive level of training increase, with the idea being, in a preemptive way, that 23,000 employees in partnership with our community are going to see dealing with this issue as a shared responsibility.
Because that's really what it is, isn't it?
right, and I think that there has been, I mean, over the summer, and we gave it to our own employees who teach enrichment programs, the training on mandatory reporting, and the fact that as a teacher or as somebody working in the school, there's a legal obligation to report anything that you suspect or hear or whatever. But I do think that there could probably still be more about training people to understand what exactly are you looking for, or what should sort of raise the, you know, the hairs on the back of
What's
your
your
neck.
hope? I mean, you've been in education for a number of years here. You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. What, in the Jane DeWinter move, what, over the next 6 months, a year, maybe it's unfair for me to ask this question, what do you want to see happening?
I would really like to see more training on what are the signs. I mean, not just what do you do if you recognize the signs, but how you know, what are you looking for? What kinds of things should do that? I think that the school system is moving towards screening, criminal background screening for volunteers, and I think that's, you know, in a lot of ways a good thing, but it's also going to be logistically and financially very difficult. So I think that there's got to be some kind of very well thought out plan to do that.
And you see that happening? I mean, do you guys?
I see a little bit of it happening in terms of the well thought out. I'm not totally sure. I as an outsider played a huge round of musical tag over in August and September about whether I had to get people who worked for me who did after school programming fingerprinted. How did I go about that? Whatever. It's a little bit of a disconnect. Probably for employees, it's much more to
Got
go.
15 seconds left.
Yeah,
David.
well, I was going to say, I can tell you
Yeah.
that there's been mandatory training that every employee in the school system has to go through, and there's an ongoing effort to look at the work we're doing,
Right.
be self-critical and improve.
And we want to have volunteers come in. We don't want to close the schools
Right.
off. What's that balance? And I look forward to hearing about how that balance is advancing on our next show. I mean, Jane, what am I saying? Jane, thank you. We'll be right back after these messages. And we're back. Stuart, welcome back.
Thank you, Don.
Many of the times you're on, you give us opportunities to look ahead, our viewers, how they can spend their upcoming weekends and weekdays with these great events, and this is no different.
The coming weeks have a lot of very interesting things happening. You know, a lot of people who are older decide that they really have to keep working or want to keep working. Either they enjoy it,
Shouldn't
or they
they?
need it for the money, of course.
Isn't it important to keep
Absolutely,
active, right?
absolutely. And furthermore, about a fourth of all new businesses are started by people over the age of 55. So there's a lot of creativity and a lot of entrepreneurship among older adults. So there are two events that tie into that coming up. One is called the What's Next Boomer Business Summit. It's a national event, takes place every year, usually in Chicago, Las Vegas, all over the place. It hasn't been in Washington for years. It's coming to the Omni Shoreham Hotel, March 23rd. It's an all-day conference, and it brings together people of all stripes and all abilities to learn from experts about what are the opportunities in what's called the longevity economy, that is dealing with the needs of older adults. So if you're an older adult and you know something about older adults and their needs, you'll learn a lot about the new technologies, new business ideas. You'll meet all the kinds of venture capitalists and others who can help you get started.
Let me ask you, what in your mind, or you've been through these, you speak at them, and what is the biggest unmet need right now where entrepreneurs can get engaged? Just off the top of your head. What do you think?
I think people just have the question, how do I get started?
Okay.
You know, what do I do, and how long will it take me to cover my costs and make, you know, there are a lot of difficult questions to be answered, and only one out of 5 new businesses actually succeed over the course of 5 years. So there's a lot of risk involved actually starting the business, but you can reduce your risk by learning more about it, and that's what these kinds of
And you know where you
conferences
can
are
also
for.
learn more about everything is on the Beacon website. So what's that?
Couldn't have
website?
said it better myself.
There you go.
www.thebeaconnewspapers.com.
Okay, so that's one. What's the other big thing?
Okay, well, now suppose you don't want to start your own business, you're not really that kind of a person, but you need to get a job. Well, there's the annual 50+ Employment Expo sponsored by the Jewish Council for the Aging and Montgomery County. It takes place every year at the North Bethesda Marriott Conference Center.
Okay.
It's April 4th from 10 to 3. And there, if you're not familiar with what it's like if you're an older adult and you haven't applied for a job in a long time, it's all done online now. And how do you fill out an application? How do you do job searches? Is my resume up to date? Where do I get the training that I need to be up to snuff for today's jobs? All of that can be answered in this one-day event. There's lots of employers on site who will be collecting resumes and interviewing and looking to hire people. And the one-on-one resume advice. It's a lot of really good things happening at that event. And thousands of people go every year, and it's really worthwhile. It's free.
So if I'm reaching a retirement point, but I want to continue working in some fashion, and I attend this kind of event, do I have to have a point of view about what I want to do, or can I get some counseling and some advice
Absolutely.
on how I may want to approach the question?
You're quite right.
What am I retiring into?
Yes, they do have advice on that kind of thing, and looking at your job skills and what you can do with that. Yes, absolutely. And they'll refer you to, there'll be a lot of resources there where you can meet and pick up cards and things from people who can help you down the road, if not at that very day.
Excellent.
What a great thing.
I was going to ask for the Boomer conference. Do you have to be a Boomer to attend
No,
that?
no. Actually, it's for all ages. In fact, there'll be
yeah.
there's going to be the one of the big shots from Lyft and Airbnb. A lot of young entrepreneurial types, who are going to be there talking about what they do. In fact, our cover story this month in the Beacon is about older drivers who work for Uber and Lyft.
That was so interesting. Tell us more about that.
Well, about a fourth of the drivers are over the age of 50. I was in Florida not long ago, and I had 4 drivers. They were all over 50. Of course, that's true of Florida, maybe in general, but in particular, these companies. And it's great because there's total flexibility in these kinds of jobs. They don't pay real well, but you get to work when you want to and how much you want to. And if you want to drive, great. And if it's bad weather or it's night, you don't feel like driving, you don't have to. I mean, that flexibility, and also the social side of being like a driver of that sort, and meeting all the fascinating people around the Washington area that you get to pick up. People love it. So we had a lot of good interviews with local people who do that.
Well, you mentioned that some of the disadvantages now. It's hard to find a job for older folks who haven't been in the market for a long time because things have changed. But what are some of the advantages for older folks who are trying to seek employment?
That's a very good point.
We'll
of
get
course,
just a little bit over 30 seconds.
Okay, well, employers know that older adults have a lot of experience. They have a strong work ethic. They know what it means to earn a living, and they know they need to. They're doing it because they want to, and they're very excited about having the opportunity to work that way. On the other hand, some of these young bosses don't know how to interact with older adults, and it can be a bit of a conflict and some tension in the office. So you need to be aware of that too, and accept the fact that your boss could be your grandchild. I mean, it happens sometimes.
That's the best thing. I've hired a number of people, especially stay-at-home moms, who've come back to the workforce more than retired folks come back. But some of the thing is, people get their work done and they go. There's not a lot of the kids don't know what Peyton Place is, right? But they don't bring drama. It's a dramaless place, and it's a great camaraderie. And I think that's one of the great advantages.
That's good. Good point.
Yeah. Well, Stuart, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And
for
look forward to
having
hear about reports, and look forward to next month's Beacon and all the great stories.
Thank you.
All right. Now we've gone across this whole spectrum of what's going on today, what's going on tomorrow, and now we're going to talk a little bit about what our history was, and Josiah Henson and this wonderfully important person who we only began hearing about a few years ago, and Merlyn, I guess we're going to be hearing a lot more about Josiah Henson.
Absolutely. Josiah Henson is one of those people in history that you may never have heard about, but one of the most important folks and interesting folks in American history. He was raised right here in Montgomery County. He lived on a tobacco plantation. There was a 3,700-acre tobacco plantation in North Bethesda, basically at the intersection of what's Old Georgetown and Tilden Lane today.
Has that neighborhood changed at all since
Absolutely. It's changed quite a lot in that time. I wish I had some of that property. But he was a slave along with his family, and he lived on this plantation from about 1795 to about 1830, when he finally, via the Underground Railroad, escaped to freedom in Canada. His story, it was so fascinating, the fact that he finally got an education and learned how to read and write, and wrote his own autobiography in 1849, which became the basis for Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Wow. So how did Harriet Beecher Stowe get a hold of this? Was this published and widely distributed?
It was a published book. I doubt if it was widely published, but the fact that she was working on her own work and obtained this story. and found this fascinating character, became Uncle Tom in her book.
Why is Josiah Henson important to us today?
Well, the fact is he was a very interesting character in that he was way ahead of his time. When he immigrated to Canada, and he brought forward about 118 different slaves from the United States into Canada.
By the way, there's a website that's coming up right now where people can learn about Josiah Henson as well as everything. So what's that website?
MontgomeryParksFoundation.org is a great site to learn more about Josiah Henson and his park here in North Bethesda. But he really was ahead of his time in terms of helping those who came to his community on helping them to be sustainable, to learn a trade, to be a farmer, to be a tradesman. And once they came back to the United States after the Civil War, they were all able to sustain themselves. So that was really one of his great legacies, an organization in a county that's very much about entrepreneurship.
Even before there were conferences like What's Next. Right?
Exactly. Exactly right.
Well, and I think part of it might be that he was one of the few people who actually wrote a first-person narrative, because there aren't that many others, are there?
That's exactly right. I mean, obviously most slaves were illiterate, and the fact is his son eventually taught him how to read and write, and that's how he was able to actually be able to author the book that became such this enormous work.
Yeah.
You know, being from California originally, I'm always amazed at how much living history there is in this area, and I think the notion of this museum being created is just great because it brings history to life for all of us.
Right, exactly.
Who was building the museum?
So the Montgomery County Parks Foundation is really behind the entity. Currently there's a small site at this intersection that I described, about 1.43 acres, that where an education center and a history museum is scheduled to be built. And it really, when it's constructed, it'll be the preeminent African American history site, not just in Montgomery County, but probably in the entire region.
And when is it set to open?
They're still gathering the funds together, so go to the Parks Foundation site and learn more information on how you can contribute and make it happen.
Yeah.
There was a television show, and I can't remember where I saw it or what the name of it was. Do you know what I'm talking about? That explored the cabin that Josiah Henson.
I think it was a PBS program within the last couple of years that went and did some archaeology work on the site. So it's a really fascinating place, and again, as the Education Center and Museum were built, I think we'll find more of the artifacts that were there in this very large plantation here in Montgomery County.
Well, I think of Royce Hanson with the Montgomery County Parks Foundation, all the things he's done to make this Montgomery County over the 50 years the great place it is right now. And I know earlier in his career, looking at public housing and tearing down the old shacks and outhouses and having our first real housing in the Kengar and the Tobytown, really where Montgomery County was very much aligned, very much similar to South Africa. We had our townships that were next, and that was all the way until about 1970. Here we are, another vestige of the racism, of slavery, of race relations in Montgomery County. How do we take Josiah Henson's story and lessons for us into the future in Montgomery County? I think, you know, it's great. I mean, so many people don't realize. We think we're this nice progressive place, but well, this way, even just 40 years ago.
Yeah, I think the fact is that every generation needs to understand not only the story, but what it means for us today. I mean, Josiah was very much about ethics, he was about education, he was about entrepreneurship, and those things that are fundamental to us of all classes, particularly African Americans here in Montgomery County. It's an important issue today that we need to learn about, and I think learning from our history helps set the stage for that.
Civil rights and within
Absolutely.
Immigrants here. I mean, it's fantastic. We've got about 30 seconds left. Anything else you want to share with us? Great stories about MCM here?
Let me say we'll have another Josiah Henson Leadership Conference coming up. We had one last month right in this very studio. We'll have another one in June, which marks the 227th anniversary of Josiah Henson's birth. So we'll be getting information out about that as well. And again, I encourage folks to contribute to the new museum and education center. It's going to be a wonderful operation here in Montgomery County.
Well, Merlyn, thank you very much, and thank you for all the hard work you do. This is such a great asset to our community, and under your leadership, it's gotten better and better.
Thanks, Don. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank all of you for being here today, and thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Mooers, and I'm inviting you to join us again next week at this very same time for our next episode.